Jumping in a little deeper, like I mentioned, we used to be the Zigbee Alliance. We are still responsible for the Zigbee Pro stack and the Smart Energy stack and lots of other things that come with that. But in 2019, we announced that we were going to start another initiative called Matter. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the next couple of slides, so I'll definitely come back to that. But one that is tightly coupled there is the data model you sort of see in the middle there on the left. So we have a data model working group. We want to make sure that both Zigbee and Matter have the same definition of a light bulb. We don't want Matter to go off and say, oh, we're defining our new light bulb and it's something different. And so developers then have to think differently about a Matter light bulb versus a Zigbee light bulb. So those need to stay in lockstep. And in order to make sure we've achieved that, we've created a data model working group that is responsible for our data model. As I said, it comes from Zigbee's history. So we have about 20 years of development of that. So lots of rich clusters, as we call them, sets of functionality sort of came in to Matter. I definitely don't want to say for free. They each take effort to put, Matter functionality around it. But we have definitions, well tested, defined by the biggest companies in the world that make light bulbs. For example, defining what a Matter or Zigbee light bulb will be. The same for door locks, smart plugs, all that. So from then, from 2019 or so, when we announced Matter, we also announced a couple of other working groups. Access control. Right now, most wireless chips that support door locks, for example, define a particular technology stack and certificate that is needed to use that radio. And that therefore complicates something like a smartphone that could potentially unlock one of those door locks. If it supports 3 radios, it needs to have 3 certificates and 3 technology stacks. So it's not necessarily a consumer-facing innovation, let's say, or standard, but it is one that's very important that reduces fragmentation in the IoT space. So that's access control. And about a year ago, we announced product security. Again, we're trying to solve the problems that face and slow down the IoT, world. Interoperability is probably the biggest and first one, but product security was often mentioned as the second one. So about a year ago, we announced a product security working group. And we will hear a little bit more about this later, but not too much in this particular talk. But what that's trying to do is attempt to align all the different regions in the world that have different regulatory components on what type of requirements are put around a connected product. And so we are working with those regulatory groups to ensure that a single umbrella standard, crossing our fingers, may be able to achieve alignment or compliance, as I said, a certification program with all of those different regions in the world. And that might take some doing because there are quite a number of different regulatory regions in the world. And very recently, we've announced 2 other groups. The data privacy working group is attempting to do something very similar to product security, but it is quite a different problem. Somebody like the CSA can't say what is allowed or not allowed on the data privacy side. I always use the camera company example. Someone might try to say, okay, I'm going to sell cameras to you and I'm going to put all that data into the cloud because that's a affordable way to do that. Someone else might come to you and say, I'm going to sell cameras to you and your data is never going to leave the house. Therefore, you need to buy this box and all your data stays in your home. And those are 2 totally different solutions to the same problem. We, in the data privacy group, just want to make sure that it's easy for those companies to convey that information to consumers so they know what they're actually getting in terms of the solution, the whole ecosystem solution with and how your data is being used in those solutions. We often liken it to a nutrition label. A bagel can have as many calories as it needs to, or I might make a bagel that has a little bit more calories than the next baker. But each of those are solutions that are that solve the problem, and they may have different cost benefits, but we just want to make sure that consumers are aware of what's happening with their data, and that's the data privacy working group. And the last one in the blue squares on the left is health and wellness, another one we've just recently announced. Matter is, and you'll see this again later as well, going into many different areas which are being implemented by Matter itself in the Matter working group on the upper left. Health and wellness is one that is going to for example, need data privacy to be a solved problem before we can really dive into the health and wellness space. The data sharing problem, I need to make sure I'm sharing my data with my doctor and not the wrong doctor, or by accident my neighbor. So health and wellness is set off in its own working group with a lot of different problems to solve. That group will certainly target aging in place and other wellness categories. Initially, again, things that matter can solve directly. And then on the right here, you see how we sort of slice and dice our members in order to interact with them. We have close to 600 engaged members. And so how do we interact with them? We divide them up into both by industry and region. So on the left-hand side, again, you see we have an EU interest group, for example, and a China member group. That allows us to interact with those regions and get technical requirements from those regions. Both of them have, for example, door lock differences in terms of what is required for a door lock to be implemented in those regions. And that's the statistics you see on the bottom on the right. And then on the top, you see that our regional breakdown is also quite balanced.